All right, welcome back everybody for another deep dive.
Always exciting.
It is, and today we're diving into something pretty heavy. Former President Trump's latest comments on the war in Ukraine,
Yeah.
specifically about how he'd end it. And we've
Wow.
got this YouTube video from 5-minute New W's breaking it all down.
Okay.
So let's get right into it.
Right into the fire.
Yeah, right into the fire. The video really zeroes in on Trump saying that if, he wins in November, he can wrap this whole war up quickly, and he drops this line, it takes two to tango,
Yeah.
really putting the emphasis on his relationship with Putin.
It's interesting, it's remarkable how vague he is about his solution,
Yeah.
This idea that just getting along with Putin is the key. It's a little unsettling, to be honest.
That's a little bit.
And historically, appeasement hasn't really,
Worked out so well.
yielded great results. No.
Yeah.
It often emboldens aggressors, You think back to Chamberlain and Hitler in the lead up to World War II. I mean, that didn't go so well.
Definitely not the outcome they were hoping for.
No.
Not at all. And there's this other part of the video where Trump criticizes Zelensky,
Right.
saying he could have avoided this whole thing if he had just given up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it really makes you wonder, what does a little bit even mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? What are we talking?
Yeah.
Now we're talking about territorial concessions, right? And that is huge implications. I mean, you'd be setting this precedent that rewards aggression.
Right.
Essentially saying invading another country is okay as long as you come away with a piece of it.
Right.
It's like, where does that end?
Yeah.
It sends a very chilling message to any other would-be aggressors out there.
It's like giving them the green light.
Exactly. And it kind of all ties into the debates that are already happening about Ukrainian sovereignty.
Yeah.
And, whether a negotiated settlement is even possible. Should Ukraine be pressured to cede territory that was taken by force?
Right.
I mean, is that even ethical?
Yeah.
Let alone strategically sound. It's a tough question.
It's a thorny issue for sure.
It is.
But then there's this constant thing from Trump about his good relationship with Putin.
His good relationship.
He keeps bringing it up like it's some kind of...
Like a badge of honor.
Yeah, like a badge of honor. And it's like, what's the motivation there?
Yeah, what's the motivation? Is it genuine admiration? Is it some calculated tactic? Or is it something else entirely? It really makes you think about personal relationships on the world stage.
Right.
And how they can play out. Can those bonds be helpful?
Yeah.
Or do they end up clouding judgment?
Yeah.
And undermining national interests?
Yeah.
It's a tightrope walk, isn't it?
Yeah.
One wrong step.
Especially with someone like Trump, who it seems, sometimes prioritizes personal connections over, established protocols.
Over procedure.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of, questionable judgment, there's this part where Trump brings up his first impeachment.
Right.
And he's actually boasting about Zelensky helping him out.
Yeah.
By saying President Trump did absolutely nothing wrong.
Did nothing wrong.
Which, of course, takes us back to those allegations about Trump pressuring Zelensky to dig up dirt on the Bidens.
Right.
And
I mean, putting aside any personal political leanings, it's never a good look to drag foreign leaders into domestic fights.
It's messy.
Right.
It raises all sorts of red flags, about potential conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
And, the erosion of public trust, both at home and on the world stage. It feeds into this anxiety about undue influence from foreign powers. The whole thing gets very complicated very quickly.
And just to add a little more fuel to the fire, the video ends with this really stark statement about the upcoming election.
A choice between democracy and dictatorship.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's while that might be oversimplifying things a bit,
right,
it does tap into a very real concern about the state of democracy.
Yeah.
Not just in the U.S., but globally.
Right.
We've seen this troubling trend of authoritarianism.
Right.
And what political scientists call democratic backsliding.
Oh, wow.
In recent years.
Can you break down democratic backsliding for us a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's essentially this gradual erosion of democratic institutions and norms.
Okay.
Often through very subtle means.
Interesting.
Think of countries like Hungary or Venezuela, where elections have become more and more manipulated.
Yeah.
And dissent is suppressed.
Wow.
It's a slow process, but it's insidious.
Right.
And it can ultimately undermine the foundations of a democratic society.
That's a scary thought.
It is a scary thought.
Makes you realize we can't just sit back and be complacent when it comes to protecting our democratic values.
No, you can't. You absolutely can't. But while we should be vigilant and engage in constructive discussions about these trends.
Right.
It's also important to avoid those simplistic us versus them narratives.
Right, because reducing these complex global issues to black and white thinking never works.
Yeah, it rarely leads to meaningful solutions.
It doesn't. There's so much nuance to unpack when it comes to elections and international relations. It's never as straightforward as some might suggest.
And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating.
It is.
We get to really delve into these complexities.
We do.
And grapple with these tough questions, even if there are no easy answers.
Even if there are no easy answers, exactly. And hopefully we all become a little more informed, a little more engaged citizens, which is so vital in any functioning democracy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's where this whole thing gets even more disturbing,
Yeah.
What's really missing from Trump's talk is any acknowledgement of the human cost of this war.
He throws around phrases like giving up a little bit, like we're talking about some minor inconvenience.
Yeah.
Not a brutal war that's taken countless lives and displaced millions of people.
It's like he's coming at this from the perspective of a real estate developer.
Yeah.
Not a leader grappling with a humanitarian crisis.
You hit it right on the head there. It really speaks volumes about his whole foreign policy outlook.
Yeah.
Which seems so fixated on, transactional wins and displays of force rather than any real understanding of the complexities of geopolitics or, the value of human life.
And that might make threat mentality can have some pretty dangerous consequences.
It can. It really can.
Yeah.
True strength in international relations comes from building alliances, fostering cooperation, and upholding what we call a rules-based order.
Okay.
It's not about bullying your way to the top or just throwing your weight around.
So what does a rules-based order actually look like?
Well, you can think of it as a set of, internationally agreed upon principles and norms that govern how countries interact. Okay. It means upholding treaties, respecting national sovereignty, and resolving disputes through diplomacy rather than resorting to threats or military action.
Got it.
It's really the foundation of international stability and cooperation.
So essentially the opposite of what we're seeing with Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really critical point.
Okay.
The broader implications of Trump's stance. What message does it send to other world leaders?
Yeah.
If the U.S., a country that has championed democracy and human rights, is suddenly seen as unreliable or willing to appease aggressors.
It's like giving a free pass to other autocratic regimes.
It is, to disregard international norms.
And just do whatever they want.
That's the danger. It could embolden them to act with impunity, which, further destabilizes the global order. Right.
And could lead to even more conflicts.
Right.
It also weakens democratic alliances and undermines America's credibility as a defender of freedom and human rights.
It's a lot to take in. I'm sure our listeners are having their own reactions to all of this.
I hope so. This isn't a situation that calls for passive observation.
Right.
It's vital for citizens to engage with these issues, form their own informed opinions, and hold their leaders accountable for the choices they make.
Absolutely, because ultimately it's our responsibility to shape the future we want to see, both at home and abroad.
You can't just sit back and let events unfold without critical thought and active participation in the process.
Exactly. And remember, this deep dive is just a starting point.
It is.
There are tons of resources out there for people who want to really go down the rabbit hole and explore the complexities of this war, U.S. foreign policy.
And, this whole dance between domestic and international politics.
It's fascinating.
Who knows? Maybe this conversation will inspire some folks to do just that.
And I hope so.
An informed citizenry is the foundation of any thriving democracy.
It really is.
So to kind of wrap up, what are the key takeaways here?
Well, the most important thing, I think, is that Trump's comments on Ukraine shouldn't just be dismissed as rhetoric.
Right.
They give us a glimpse into his worldview, his understanding of diplomacy and how he might approach foreign policy if he's given another chance at the presidency.
Right. And that's something every voter needs to think about.
Absolutely.
His comments raise some serious concerns about
Yeah.
his grasp of international relations,
Yeah.
his judgment when it comes to dealing with someone like Putin,
Right.
and his commitment to democratic values and human rights.
All of that.
They also highlight how important it is to elect leaders who prioritize diplomacy over aggression, cooperation over isolationism, and, a rules-based international order
Yes.
over personal whims or deals.
The stakes are high.
It couldn't be higher.
They really couldn't. The future of global peace and security might very well depend on the choices we make in the coming months and years.
This deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about.
It has.
And it's clear there are no easy answers when it comes to resolving this conflict.
Absolutely. There's so many perspectives, so many complexities, and
Right.
so many challenges ahead.
But that's exactly why we need to keep talking,
We do.
keep learning, and keep pushing for peaceful solutions.
Keep pushing. Yeah.
Before we go, I have one final thought that's been kind of bugging me. If Trump really believes that Zelensky could have just given up a little bit to avoid this whole war,
Yeah.
what does that say about how he sees Putin's goals?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests he's completely misreading what Putin's after.
Okay.
This wasn't about taking a little piece of land.
Right.
This was about taking over all of Ukraine, wiping out their culture and forcing them back into Russia's control.
So offering concessions wouldn't have satisfied Putin.
Not at all.
It would have just made him want more.
Exactly. It's like trying to reason with a bully by giving them your lunch money.
Right.
They don't become your friend, they just come back for more.
And that's a scary thought when you think about what it could mean for the whole world.
It is scary.
If Putin gets away with this kind of aggression,
Yeah.
what's stopping other dictators from doing the same thing?
It sets a dangerous precedent that could unravel the whole system we've had since World War II.
Right.
The system that's mostly kept us from having huge wars.
Hmm.
It's why everyone's watching what happens in Ukraine so closely.
Right.
What happens there will affect everyone.
It really makes you realize how connected we all are
We are.
and how important it is to stand up for democracy and the rule of law.
Couldn't agree more, and it goes back to what we talked about before,
Okay.
about how important it is for people to be informed and involved. We can't just sit back and watch this happen.
Yeah.
We have to talk about it, think critically, and hold our leaders accountable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Uh-huh.
I want to leave our listeners with one last question to think about.
Right.
What do you think is the best way to bring lasting peace to Ukraine? And what should America's role be in that?
It's a big question,
Yeah,
and one that will shape the future.
for sure.
There are no easy answers.
Right.
But by talking openly, listening to different views, and staying committed to democracy and human rights,
Yeah.
we can hopefully find our way through this.
And make the world a more peaceful place.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into such a crucial topic.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back next week with another exploration of something fascinating.
Looking forward to it.
Until then.